I watched my sister-in-law Maya sign the last document with a flourish, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the mahogany table in my dining room. My dining room, my house. The house that, in exactly 14 months, would be seized by her creditors and auctioned off for a fraction of its worth. "There," she said brightly, sliding the papers toward me. "Just need your signature, Emma, right there at the bottom." I stared at the business registration forms, my hand trembling as I reached for the pen. Not from fear this time, from rage, because I'd already lived this moment once before. 3 weeks ago, I died in a car accident on the highway, my last thoughts consumed by bitter regret and the image of Maya walking away from my foreclosed home with a designer bag on her arm, laughing into her phone. 3 weeks ago, I'd taken my final breath at 42 years old, penniless, homeless, and utterly destroyed. And then I'd woken up, January 15th, 2019. 5 years in the past. The morning of my 37th birthday, in the bed I shared with my husband Derek in the house I still owned. The house I'd stupidly, trustingly signed away. "Emma?" My mother-in-law Patricia's sharp voice cut through my thoughts. She sat across from me, her lips pursed in that expression of perpetual disappointment she reserved especially for me. "We're waiting." Derek squeezed my shoulder, his touch making my skin crawl. In my first life, I'd interpreted that squeeze as support. Now I knew it for what it was. A warning. A reminder of my place. "Maya's been so generous, sharing this business opportunity with us," he said, his voice carrying that patronizing tone he used when he wanted me to comply. "The least we can do is help her get started. It's just paperwork, honey. Just paperwork. Just my home address listed as the principal place of business for Maya's Luxury Imports LLC. Just my property on the line when Maya racked up $300,000 in supplier debts, took out fraudulent loans using the business address as collateral, and disappeared to Singapore with her boyfriend and all the liquid assets. Just my entire life destroyed." I picked up the pen. "Actually," I said, setting it down again with a soft click, "I need to think about this." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Think about what?" Patricia's eyes narrowed to slits. "Maya is family. Family helps family." "I understand that," I said calmly, even as my heart raced. This was the moment I'd rehearsed 1,000 times in my head since waking up in the past. But I'd like to understand the business better first. "Maya, can you walk me through your business plan, your supplier contracts, your projected cash flow?" Maya's smile faltered. "Well, it's all very technical. You wouldn't really understand. Try me." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "I have a degree in accounting, remember? A degree I'd barely used because Derek had insisted I quit my job to support him and take care of the home. In my first life, I'd been so grateful for his permission to be useful, to help his family, that I'd signed anything they'd put in front of me." Derek's hand tightened on my shoulder, his fingers digging in. "Emma, don't be difficult. This is embarrassing." "What's embarrassing," I said, shrugging off his hand and standing, "is that you're all acting like I'm being unreasonable for wanting to understand a business that will be registered at my home address, my property. Maya, surely you have documentation. I don't have to explain myself to you." Maya's voice rose, her composure cracking. "Derek, control your wife. Control your wife," the words that had defined my entire first marriage. I looked at Derek, really looked at him, and saw what I'd been too naive to see before. The weak chin, the calculating eyes, the way he positioned himself slightly behind his mother, letting her fight his battles. "I'm not signing," I said clearly. Patricia stood, her chair scraping loudly against my hardwood floors. "How dare you? After everything we've done for you, what have you done for me?" I interrupted, and the shock on her face was almost worth the 5 years of suffering I'd endured. "Specifically, list it." "We welcomed you into this family. Derek married me. That's not something you did for me. We invited you to family dinners, where I cooked, served, and cleaned up while you criticized everything from my recipes to my weight to my inability to give Derek children. That last part was a particular cruelty, given that Derek was the one with fertility issues, a fact he'd hidden from everyone, letting them blame me instead." Patricia's face flushed purple. "You ungrateful? I think you should all leave," I said quietly. This is my son's house, too, Patricia shrieked. Actually, I said, walking to the kitchen and pulling a folder from the drawer where I'd hidden it this morning. It's not. I'd spent the 3 weeks since my rebirth working in secret, moving money, consulting lawyers, gathering documents. I'd learned from my mistakes. In my first life, I'd been too trusting, too eager to please, too afraid of confrontation. I was done being afraid. I slid the papers across to Derek. These are divorce papers. I'm filing on grounds of financial fraud and emotional abuse. I've documented everything, including the 3 credit cards you opened in my name without my knowledge, the joint savings account you emptied last year to give to your sister, and the $50,000 you borrowed from my inheritance when my father died. Derek's face went white. You can't prove... I have bank statements, credit card records, and a paper trail. I've also had a very interesting conversation with an attorney about your mother's role in coercing financial decisions. Apparently, there are laws against elder abuse and financial manipulation. Though I suppose I'm not quite elder yet. The principle applies. You've lost your mind. Maya grabbed the business registration forms, crumpling them in her fist. Fine, I don't need your stupid house anyway. I'll find someone else. Good luck with that, I said, because I've already filed a police report about your fraudulent business scheme. That was a lie, but Maya didn't know that. Her face went chalk white. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that you don't have a business. You have a front. You're planning to import counterfeit luxury goods, sell them as authentic, and when your suppliers come after you for payment, you are going to use my property as the collateral, my home as your shield. I watched Maya's expression crack, and I knew I was right. In my first life, I'd only pieced it together too late, after the authorities had seized my house as part of the investigation into her fraud. The creditors had gotten there first, but the criminal charges had come later, ensuring I couldn't even fight the foreclosure. That's insane, Maya said, but her voice shook. Derek, your wife has gone completely insane. Has she? I pulled out my phone, opening to a screenshot I'd taken. Because this is your supplier contact in Shenzhen. I recognized the email from when you left your laptop open at Christmas. I had a translator friend help me read the correspondence. Replica products, Maya. Not luxury imports. Replicas. Fakes, which you planned to sell as real while the legal liability fell on whoever was stupid enough to let you use their address. The silence was deafening. Derek found his voice first. When did you... I've been paying attention, I said simply. Probably should have done that years ago. Patricia grabbed her purse, her hands shaking with rage. You'll regret this. You'll come crawling back, begging for forgiveness, and we won't be there. I'm counting on it, I said, holding the door open. They left in a storm of threats and recriminations, Maya crying dramatically, Derek silent and calculating, Patricia promising I'd never see a dime in the divorce. The moment the door closed behind them, I locked it, leaned against it, and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 5 years. Then I pulled out my phone and called my attorney. Sarah, it's Emma. They took the bait. Yes, all of it. Maya panicked exactly like you said she would. No, they didn't sign anything, which means we're clear. How soon can we expedite the divorce? The next 3 months were brutal. Derek fought the divorce with every tactic his mother's money could buy. They dragged up every petty grievance, every mistake I'd made, every moment of disobedience or disrespect. They painted me as mentally unstable, vindictive, a liar. But I had something they didn't. The truth, documented and irrefutable. And I had something else, too. Something I'd never had in my first life. I had rage. Not the hot, explosive kind that fades quickly. The cold, calculated kind that plans and executes and doesn't stop until justice is served. Sarah, my attorney, was a shark in designer heels. I'd found her through a women's advocacy group I joined in my second week after Rebirth. In my first life, I'd been too isolated, too dependent on Derek's approval to build my own support network. This time, I'd networked like my life depended on it. Because it did. They're going to come at you hard on the financial fraud claims, Sarah warned me in her office, a corner suite with a view of the city. Derek's attorney is claiming you're exaggerating, that you had equal access to all accounts, that you're trying to inflate your settlement. Let them, I said, sliding another folder across her desk. These are the emails I recovered from Derek's laptop before I moved out. He was very thorough about documenting his loans to Maya, including the one from my inheritance that he specifically told her I didn't need to know about. Sarah's eyebrows rose. You hacked his laptop? I used his password, which he gave me years ago. Is that hacking? In the legal sense? No. Ethically questionable? Possibly. Admissible in court? She grinned. Absolutely. The divorce hearing was set for April. In the meantime, I did something I'd never done in my first life. I lived for myself. I went back to school, enrolling in a forensic accounting certification program. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was training to uncover financial fraud while uncovering my own husband's. I reconnected with old friends Derek had isolated me from, apologizing for years of canceled plans and ignored calls. Most of them welcomed me back with open arms and stories of their own about toxic relationships they'd escaped. I started therapy, working through the trauma of both lives, the one I'd lived and the one I'd barely survived, and I watched Maya's business scheme fall apart in real time. Without my address to use, she'd apparently convinced her boyfriend's elderly mother to list the business at her property. I felt a pang of guilt about that, until I discovered that the boyfriend, Tom, was in on the scam. They were using his mother's house because she had dementia and didn't understand what she was signing. That guilt evaporated. I made an anonymous call to Adult Protective Services. The investigation was swift and merciless. Tom and Maya's entire operation was exposed. Not just the counterfeit scheme, but also the elder abuse, the fraudulent loan applications, everything. I watched the news coverage with a glass of wine in my new apartment, a modest one-bedroom I'd rented with money I'd carefully extracted from the joint accounts before Derek could hide it all. Maya's face flashed on the screen, her makeup running as reporters shouted questions. Ms. Chen, is it true you defrauded your boyfriend's mother? Ms. Chen, what do you say to the allegations of importing counterfeit goods? My phone rang. Derek. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, Patricia called. Voicemail. Then Maya herself, sobbing hysterically. I blocked her number and ordered Thai food. The divorce was finalized on a rainy morning in April. Derek was forced to pay me back every penny he'd stolen, including the $50,000 from my inheritance, with interest. The credit card debt he'd accumulated in my name was transferred entirely to him. And because Sarah had proven a pattern of financial abuse, I was awarded a portion of his retirement account and ongoing alimony for 3 years. It's not much, Sarah said as we left the courthouse, but it's yours, free and clear. It's everything, I told her, and it was. Not the money, though that helped. It was my freedom. That night, I did something I'd fantasized about for 5 years in my first life and 3 months in my second. I went to Derek's mother's house, the house where they'd held that fateful meeting where they'd tried to pressure me into signing my life away, and I knocked on the door. Patricia answered, her face haggard. The months of legal battles had taken their toll. What do you want? She spat. I want you to know something, I said calmly. In another life, in the life I was supposed to live, I signed those papers. I let Maya register her business at my address. And when it all fell apart, when her creditors came after her, they put a lien on my house. They seized it, sold it at auction. I lost everything. Patricia's expression flickered with confusion. What are you talking about? That didn't happen. No, I agreed. It didn't. Because I stopped it. Because this time, I knew better. I knew what you all were, and I protected myself. You're insane, Patricia whispered. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I'm the only sane one. Maya's in jail, Patricia. She's facing federal fraud charges. Tom turned on her to save himself, and she's looking at 5 to 10 years. Your son is bankrupt. The legal fees alone destroyed him, and the alimony payments will keep him underwater for years. And you mortgaged this house to pay for his lawyers, and you'll lose it within the year. Her face crumpled. You did this. You destroyed my family. No, I said, and I meant it. You destroyed yourselves. You just tried to use me as collateral damage. I simply refused to be destroyed with you. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Patricia, happy birthday. It wasn't her birthday, but it had been mine. The day they'd cornered me in my dining room, the day they'd tried to sacrifice me for Maya's scheme. I drove away and never looked back. 6 months after the divorce, I was sitting in a cafe working on a case study for my forensic accounting program when someone slid into the seat across from me. Emma Chen? Sorry, Emma Rodriguez now, right? Your maiden name? I looked up to find a woman in her 50s, professionally dressed, with kind eyes and a warm smile. Yes, I said cautiously. I'm Jennifer Walsh. I'm an attorney specializing in financial fraud cases, and I've been following your divorce case. Well, not following. That sounds creepy. I'm friends with Sarah Martinez, your attorney. She mentioned you were finishing your forensic accounting certification. I am, I said slowly. Why? Jennifer pulled out a business card. Because I need someone exactly like you. Someone who understands financial fraud from the inside. Someone who's lived it, survived it, and had the guts to fight back. I have a client, a woman whose husband is hiding assets in a divorce. Complex corporate structures, offshore accounts, the works. She needs an expert to untangle it. I took the card, my mind racing. I'm not certified yet, I pointed out, but you will be. In the meantime, I can hire you as a consultant. Sarah says you're brilliant, detail-oriented, and relentless. That's exactly what I need. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. When do I start? Turns out, I was good at this. Really good. Finding hidden assets, tracing money trails, uncovering fraud. It was like a puzzle, and I'd become an expert at seeing the pieces everyone else missed. Within a year, I was working full-time for Jennifer's firm. Within 2, I'd started my own consultancy, specializing in helping victims of financial abuse in divorces and family disputes. I called it Second Chance Financial Forensics. The irony made me smile every time I saw the sign on my office door. My clients were mostly women who'd trusted the wrong people, signed the wrong papers, believed the lies they'd been told about their own incompetence with money. Women who'd been isolated, manipulated, gaslit. Women like I'd been. I helped them find their money, prove the fraud, and rebuild their lives. And I was very, very good at it. 3 years after my divorce, I was featured in a local business magazine. The Fraud. Fighter, how Emma Rodriguez turned personal tragedy into professional triumph. The article detailed my story, the divorce, the fraud, the rebuilding. It mentioned Maya's conviction, Derek's bankruptcy, Patricia's foreclosure. It painted me as a survivor, a phoenix risen from the ashes. If only they knew. If only they knew I'd burned twice and been reborn once. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon. Second Chance Financial, this is Emma. Emma Rodriguez? The voice was female, young, uncertain. Speaking. My name is Lisa Chen. I'm Derek Chen's new wife. I almost dropped the phone. I'm sorry, what? I know this is weird, Lisa rushed on. I know you probably hate me, and you have every right to, but I need help. I found your article online, and I didn't know who else to call. I sat down slowly. What kind of help? Derek. He's been pressuring me to sign papers, business registration forms for his sister's new company, and his mother keeps saying it's just a formality, that it's family helping family, but something feels wrong, and I read your article, and I realized... Her voice broke. I realized this is exactly what they tried to do to you. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Derek had remarried, and they were running the same scam. Of course they were. Lisa, I said carefully, do not sign anything. Do you understand? Nothing. But they're saying if I don't, it proves I don't trust Derek, that I'm not committed to the marriage. That's manipulation. Classic manipulation. Listen to me very carefully. What they're asking you to do is put your property at risk for a business venture you have no control over. If that business fails, or if it's fraudulent, you will lose everything. Your home, your savings, your credit. Everything. I heard her breathing shakily on the other end. I need you to do something for me, I continued. I need you to gather every document they've asked you to sign. Every contract, every form, every piece of paper. Don't let them know you're doing it. Just photograph everything with your phone and email it to me. Can you do that? Yes, she whispered. Yes, I can do that. Good. And Lisa, start documenting everything. Every conversation, every pressure tactic, every threat. Dates, times, what was said. Keep it somewhere they can't find it. A private email account, a cloud drive they don't have access to. Can you do that too? I can. Then do it. And call me back when you have the documents. We're going to make sure you don't become their next victim. Lisa's documents arrived in my inbox that night. It was worse than I'd thought. Maya was out on parole, early release for good behavior and overcrowding, and she'd started a new business. Chen Family Ventures LLC. Same scam, different name, but this time they'd learned from their mistakes. The business registration listed Lisa's address, yes, but they'd also forged documents that made it look like Lisa was a partner, an investor, someone with actual authority and knowledge. If this went south, Lisa wouldn't just lose her property. She'd face criminal liability. I called Jennifer immediately. We need to move fast, I told her. They're setting her up for fraud charges. Can you prove she didn't know? She hired me, didn't she? That's evidence of good faith. Plus, I have her initial call recorded, with her permission, where she explicitly states she's uncomfortable and being pressured. And I'm going to help her file a police report tonight. Emma, Jennifer said slowly, this is your ex-husband. Are you sure you want to be involved in this? It could look like I'm getting revenge. Let them think that. I'm helping a woman who's being victimized by the same people who victimized me. That's not revenge, that's public service. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed. God, I love working with you. Okay, let's bury these bastards. We moved. Like a surgical strike. First, Lisa filed for a protective order, claiming financial coercion and emotional abuse. I provided an expert affidavit detailing the patterns of behavior that matched my own experience with Derek and his family. Second, we filed a police report about the forged documents. Lisa's signature had been forged on several investment contracts, making her liable for debts she'd never agreed to. Third, and this was my favorite part, we contacted the parole board. Maya's early release had conditions. One of them was that she couldn't engage in any business activities related to her conviction without prior approval and supervision. She'd violated parole. The dominoes fell beautifully. The police investigation uncovered that Chen Family Ventures was indeed another counterfeit import scheme. Maya had been working with the same suppliers, using the same methods. Derek had been helping her, knowing full well it was illegal. Patricia had been financing it. With money from a reverse mortgage on her new rental property she'd lied about on the application, claiming it as her primary residence to get better rates. All of them were guilty. All of them were caught. I sat in the courtroom during Maya's parole violation hearing, watching her cry and plead and blame everyone but herself. Derek sat beside her, stone-faced, knowing his own charges were coming. Patricia wasn't there. She'd had a stroke when the police had shown up at her door. She was in a nursing home now, her cognitive function too impaired to stand trial. I felt a twinge of something, not quite sympathy, but not satisfaction either. Just sadness. For the waste of it all, the judge revoked Maya's parole and sentenced her to serve the remainder of her original sentence, plus additional time for the new fraud charges. Derek's trial was set for the following month. As I left the courthouse, I found Lisa waiting on the steps. "Thank you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for saving me." "You saved yourself," I told her gently. "You asked for help. That's the hardest part. What do I do now?" "Now? You divorce him, you rebuild, and you live. You get therapy. You reconnect with people who actually care about you. You figure out who you are outside of this nightmare." "Like you did?" "Like I did." She hugged me. This woman I'd never met before 3 months ago. This woman who'd married my ex-husband and nearly suffered the same fate I had. "I read your article," she said, pulling back, "about turning tragedy into triumph, about helping other women. I want to do that too, someday. When I'm ready." "You will be," I assured her. "And when you are, give me a call. I could use someone who understands." Derek's trial was swift and merciless. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged documents, the fraudulent business, his knowledge of Maya's parole violations, his active participation in the scheme. He was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. I didn't attend the sentencing. I was done with Derek, done with his family, done with that entire chapter of my life. But I did send a letter to the judge to be read into the record. In it, I detailed the pattern of financial abuse I'd suffered during our marriage. The manipulation, the gaslighting, the theft. I explained how he'd tried to use me as a shield for his sister's crimes, how he'd isolated me from support systems, how he'd made me doubt my own competence and worth. I explained that his actions toward Lisa were not an aberration, but a pattern, and I asked the judge to consider that in sentencing. The judge added an additional year for the financial abuse charges, noting the deliberate and predatory pattern of behavior toward vulnerable, intimate partners. When I heard, I poured myself a glass of expensive wine and toasted the empty room. To second chances, I said aloud, and to making them count. 5 years after my rebirth, I was standing in the lobby of a downtown office building admiring the directory. 3rd floor. Second Chance Financial Forensics, Emma Rodriguez, CFE, Certified Fraud Examiner. I'd passed the exam on my first try. My firm had grown. I now employed 3 other investigators, all women who'd survived financial abuse and wanted to help others do the same. We'd helped dozens of clients recover millions in stolen assets. We'd contributed to the prosecution of 12 domestic abusers. We'd changed lives. My phone buzzed with a message from Sarah, my attorney friend. Lunch next week? I have a referral for you. High-profile case, big money, nasty divorce, right up your alley. I smiled and typed back, absolutely. Send me the details. As I headed to my office, I thought about the life I'd lived before. The life where I'd signed those papers, where I'd trusted the wrong people, where I'd lost everything. That life had taught me what mattered. Not money, not property, not other people's approval. What mattered was agency, control over your own destiny, the courage to say no, and the wisdom to recognize a trap before you stepped into it. I'd been given an impossible gift, a second chance at life, at making different choices, at becoming who I was meant to be. I hadn't wasted it, and every time I helped another woman escape the trap I'd once been caught in, I honored that gift. My first meeting of the day was with a new client. Her name was Sarah, a different Sarah, not my attorney friend. She was 29, soft-spoken, and scared. My fiancé wants me to co-sign a business loan, she told me, her hands twisting in her lap. His brother is starting a company, and they need collateral. My house is paid off. It was my parents' house. They left it to me when they died. He says if I really loved him, I'd trust him. That we're going to be married anyway, so what's the difference? I looked at this young woman, saw myself in her, uncertain eyes, and felt that familiar fire kindle in my chest. The difference, I said gently, is everything. Let me explain why. And as I walked her through the red flags, the manipulation tactics, the legal implications, I felt a deep sense of purpose. This was why I'd been given a second chance. Not for revenge, though that had been satisfying, not for justice, though that had been necessary, but for this, to be the person I'd needed 5 years ago, to be the voice that says stop when everyone else is saying trust, to be the expert who sees through the scam, who protects the vulnerable, who fights for those who don't yet know how to fight for themselves. By the end of our meeting, Sarah had decided not to co-sign the loan. She was also reconsidering the engagement entirely. I think I need to take some time, she said, figure out who I am outside of this relationship. He's been pushing me to quit my job too, to start a family, and I'm only 29. You have time, I assured her. You have all the time in the world. Don't let anyone pressure you into decisions that don't feel right. She left with tears in her eyes, but also with a straighter spine and steadier shoulders. I watched her go and thought, that's one life saved. One woman who won't wake up at 42, homeless and broken, wondering where it all went wrong. One woman who won't need a rebirth because she got it right the first time. That evening, I was locking up the office when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Emma Rodriguez? A male voice, official sounding. Speaking. This is Detective Michael Torres with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. I'm calling about a case we're building against a fraud ring operating in the luxury import sector. Your name came up in our research. You were involved in a case 5 years ago involving a woman named Maya Chen. My heart rate kicked up. Yes, she's currently serving time for fraud. We know. The thing is, Ms. Rodriguez, Maya Chen wasn't working alone. She was part of a larger network, an international operation trafficking in counterfeit goods. We've been tracking them for 3 years, and we're finally ready to move. But we need an expert in financial forensics to help us untangle the money trail, someone familiar with this specific type of scheme. You want me to consult on the case? More than consult. We want you to testify as an expert witness. Your experience with the Chen case gives you unique insight into their methods, and your professional credentials as a CFE make you credible in court. I thought about Maya, about the schemes she'd tried to pull, about all the other victims there might be out there. I'll do it, I said. Send me the details. There's one more thing, Detective Torres said. This case is big, international. When we bring charges, it's going to be front-page news. Your name will be attached to it. I need to know you're prepared for that level of exposure. I thought about my first life, where I'd hidden from the world, ashamed of being a victim. I thought about this life, where I'd built a career on refusing to be silent. Detective, I said, I'm not afraid of exposure. I'm afraid of what happens when we stay silent. When do you need me? The case took 8 months to build. 8 months of diving deep into financial records, tracking money through shell corporations and offshore accounts, connecting the dots between hundreds of seemingly unrelated transactions. It was the most complex, challenging work I'd ever done, and I loved every minute of it. The fraud ring was massive. 37 people across 6 countries, moving counterfeit goods worth an estimated $800 million over a 5-year period. Maya had been a small fish, a regional operator, but her methods had been taught to her by someone higher up the chain, and those methods left a signature. A signature I'd learned to recognize. I found connections no one else had seen. I traced money trails that other investigators had given up on. I built a case so airtight that when the indictments came down, 23 of the 37 defendants immediately pled guilty rather than face trial. The remaining 14 went to court. I testified for 3 days. It was brutal. Defense attorneys attacked my credentials, my motivations, my relationship to Maya Chen. They implied I was biased, vengeful, obsessed. I stayed calm. I presented evidence. I explained complex financial transactions in terms a jury could understand. And when the verdict came back, guilty on all counts for all defendants, I allowed myself one moment of pure, unfiltered triumph. We'd done it. We'd taken down an international criminal organization, and I'd been part of it. The press coverage was intense. My face was in newspapers, on websites, on the evening news. The fraud fighter who took down an international crime ring. My phone rang off the hook with interview requests, consulting offers, speaking invitations. I accepted the ones that aligned with my mission, helping victims, educating the public, preventing fraud. I turned down the ones that felt exploitative or sensationalistic. And through it all, I kept working, kept helping women untangle themselves from financial abuse, kept building cases, finding evidence, fighting for justice. Because that's what second chances were for. Not to waste time on revenge fantasies or bitterness, but to make every single moment count. 7 years after my rebirth, I was invited to speak at a conference on financial fraud prevention. The keynote address in front of 500 professionals. I almost said no. Public speaking still terrified me. The little voice in my head, Derek's voice, Patricia's voice, the voice of my first life, still whispered that I wasn't good enough, smart enough, important enough. But then I thought about Sarah, the 29-year-old who'd walked out of my office with her head held high. I thought about Lisa, Derek's second wife, who'd called me last month to tell me she'd finished her accounting degree and was applying to forensic programs. I thought about all the women I'd helped, all the lives I'd changed. And I said yes. The conference was in Chicago, at a massive hotel with crystal chandeliers and more marble than a Roman temple. I stood backstage, wearing a navy suit I'd bought specifically for this occasion, my hands shaking as I waited for my introduction. Our keynote speaker today is a woman who has revolutionized the field of forensic accounting in domestic abuse cases. As a survivor herself, she brings both professional expertise and personal insight to her work. She's helped recover over $15 million in stolen assets, contributed to the prosecution of dozens of abusers, and brought down an international fraud ring. Please welcome Emma Rodriguez. The applause was thunderous. I walked out onto the stage, looked at the sea of faces, and felt something shift inside me. I wasn't afraid. I was ready. 7 years ago, I began, I was about to make the worst mistake of my life. I was about to sign papers that would give my sister-in-law permission to register her business at my home address. It seemed harmless. It seemed like I was being helpful, supporting family. I paused, letting the silence stretch. In another version of my life, I signed those papers, and it destroyed me. I lost my home, my savings, my sense of self-worth. I died broken and alone, wondering how I'd been so stupid, so blind, so weak. I could see people leaning forward, captivated. But I got a second chance. Not everyone does. And I've spent every day of that second chance making sure other women don't need one. Making sure they see the trap before they step into it. Making sure they know their worth, their power, their rights. I clicked to the first slide of my presentation. Today, I'm going to teach you how to recognize financial abuse in its early stages, how to document it, how to help victims escape it, and how to hold abusers accountable. For the next hour, I poured everything I knew into that presentation. Every lesson I'd learned, every pattern I'd identified, every tool I'd developed. The audience was rapt. When I finished, the applause lasted a full minute. During the Q&A, a woman in the front row raised her hand. "You mentioned a second chance," she said. "Can you elaborate on what you meant by that? It sounded like more than just a metaphor." I smiled. It was both a metaphor and something more. Let's just say I learned from my mistakes in a very profound way, and I made a choice to use that knowledge to help others. We all get moments where we can choose a different path. Mine was just more dramatic than most. It was as close to the truth as I could come. After the conference, I was approached by a literary agent. "Your story is incredible," she said. "Have you ever thought about writing a book?" "About what?" "About this. About surviving financial abuse, rebuilding your life, helping others. There are millions of women who need to hear this." I thought about it. A book. My story, my lessons, my expertise, available to anyone who needed it. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I'd like to write that book." Second Chance. How I Escaped Financial Abuse and Built a Life Worth Living was published 18 months later. It became a bestseller. Not overnight, not in some fairy tale twist, but slowly, steadily, through word of mouth and book club recommendations and women pressing copies into their friends' hands and saying, "You need to read this." I went on a book tour, speaking in libraries and community centers and women's shelters. I met hundreds of women who'd survived their own versions of my story, who'd been manipulated, stolen from, controlled. And I told them, "You're not alone. You're not stupid. You're not weak. You're a survivor, and you deserve better." The book led to more speaking engagements, more consulting work, more opportunities to make a difference. It also led to something I didn't expect: closure. I was signing books at an event in Seattle when a woman approached my table. She was in her 60s, well-dressed, with kind eyes. "Emma Rodriguez," she said. "Yes, how can I personalize this for you?" "I'm not here for a book," she said quietly. "I'm here to apologize." I looked up, confused. She took a breath. "My name is Margaret Chen. I'm Derek's aunt, Patricia's sister." My blood ran cold. "I need you to know," she continued, "that I had no idea what they were doing to you. I was estranged from the family, had been for years because of similar issues. Patricia and I, we didn't see eye to eye on how to treat people. But after everything came out, after the trials and the news coverage, I realized I should have done more. I should have reached out to you, should have warned you about them." I set down my pen. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I read your book, and I recognized myself in it, not in you, but in the people who stood by and did nothing, the people who knew what Patricia was like, what Maya was capable of, and just stayed quiet to avoid conflict. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you went through that alone." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Then I stood and hugged her. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for saying that." When I pulled back, there were tears in her eyes. "For what it's worth," she said, "Patricia is in memory care now. Advanced dementia. She doesn't recognize anyone. Maya gets out in 3 years, but she's already violated parole once. She'll be watched for the rest of her life. And Derek wrote you a letter. I don't know if you want it, but he asked me to give it to you if I ever saw you. She held out an envelope. I stared at it. What does it say? I don't know. He sealed it. You don't have to read it if you don't want to. I took the envelope, feeling its weight in my hands. Thank you, Margaret. She nodded and left. I waited until I was back in my hotel room that night to open it. Derek's handwriting was still achingly familiar. Neat, precise, controlled. Emma, I know you have no reason to read this, let alone believe it. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. I just want you to know that I understand now what I did. Prison gives you a lot of time to think, and I've been thinking about you, about us, about who I was and what I became. My mother raised me to believe that family came first, that loyalty meant sacrifice, and that love meant control. I never questioned it. I just assumed that's how the world worked. But it wasn't love. It was manipulation, and I was too weak to see it, too afraid to stand up to her, too selfish to care what it cost you. You were the best thing in my life, and I treated you like you were worthless. I stole from you, lied to you, tried to destroy you to protect people who didn't deserve protection. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't forgive myself, but I want you to know that you were right. About everything. And I'm glad you got out. I'm glad you're thriving. I'm glad you turned your pain into something that helps people. You deserved so much better than me. I hope you found it. Derek. I read it twice. Then I folded it, put it back in the envelope, and filed it away in my suitcase. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt nothing. Derek was a chapter of my life that had ended years ago. His apology, his understanding, his regret, they didn't change what had happened. They didn't erase the pain, but they also didn't matter anymore. I'd moved on. I'd built a life he couldn't touch, couldn't taint, couldn't take from me. And that was the greatest victory of all. 10 years. After my rebirth, I stood in the living room of my house, the one I'd fought for and kept, and looked around at the people gathered there. Sarah, my attorney, now a partner at her firm and one of my closest friends. Lisa, Derek's ex-wife, now a certified forensic accountant working at my firm. Jennifer, my first boss in forensics, now retired but still mentoring young women in the field. Margaret, Derek's aunt, who'd become a friend and ally. And a dozen other women, clients I'd helped, colleagues I'd worked with, survivors I'd spoken with. We were celebrating the 10th anniversary of Second Chance Financial Forensics. 10 years of fighting fraud, 10 years of helping women escape abuse, 10 years of justice. I want to propose a toast, Sarah said, raising her glass. To Emma, who showed us all what it means to turn pain into power, trauma into triumph, and a second chance into a life worth living. To Emma, the room chorused. I felt tears prick my eyes. Happy tears. Thank you, I said. All of you. For believing in me, for supporting this work, for being part of this mission. We've helped over 500 women in 10 years. We've recovered over $50 million in stolen assets. We've put 37 abusers behind bars. And we're just getting started. The applause was warm, genuine, full of love. As the party continued, I slipped outside onto my porch, looking up at the stars. I thought about the woman I'd been in my first life. Scared, compliant, desperate for approval. I thought about the moment I'd woken up in the past, given an impossible gift, and I thought about the choice I'd made, not just to save myself, but to save others. Thank you, I whispered to the universe, to fate, to whatever force had given me this second chance. I didn't waste it. The door opened behind me and Lisa stepped out. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said, smiling. More than okay. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. She joined me, looking up at the stars. Do you ever think about what would have happened? She asked. If you'd signed those papers? Every day, I admitted. It keeps me sharp, keeps me focused, reminds me why this work matters. I'm glad you didn't, she said quietly. Sign them, I mean. Because if you had, I wouldn't be here. I'd probably be in the same place you were. And there'd be no one to save me. There would have been someone, I said. There's always someone, if you're brave enough to ask for help. But you made it easier, she insisted. You built a whole organization to catch people like us when we fall. That's not nothing. No, I agreed. It's everything. We stood in comfortable silence, two women who'd survived the same trap, set by the same people, saved by the same refusal to accept abuse as love. Come on, Lisa said eventually. They're cutting the cake. I followed her inside, back to the warmth and light and laughter. Back to the life I'd built. The life I'd earned. The life I'd been given a second chance to live. And as I blew out the candles on the anniversary cake, 10 candles for 10 years, I made a wish. Not for myself. For every woman still trapped, still suffering, still believing the lies she's been told about her worth. I wished for her to find her second chance, and I promised to be there when she did. Because that's what survivors do. We reach back, we pull others up, we make sure no one suffers alone, and we turn our second chances into someone else's first hope. That's the real revenge. Not destroying your enemies, but thriving so completely, so absolutely, that you become the person who saves others from becoming you. I looked around at the faces of the women I'd helped, the lives I'd changed, the futures I'd protected. This was my legacy, not the money I'd recovered, not the abusers I'd prosecuted, but this. A room full of women who'd reclaimed their power, their agency, their lives. Women who'd been women, given a second chance, or who'd seized one for themselves. Women who were thriving, and I'd helped make that possible. The house they'd tried to take from me, the one Maya had wanted to use as collateral for her fraud, the one Derek had tried to destroy to protect his family, was now filled with laughter and hope and fierce, unbreakable strength. It was poetic justice. It was perfect. It was everything. Speech, someone called out. I raised my glass. 10 years ago, I made a choice, I said. I chose to fight back. I chose to protect myself. I chose to turn my pain into purpose. But I couldn't have done any of it alone. Every woman in this room has contributed to this mission, whether as a colleague, a client, a friend, or a fellow survivor. We've built something bigger than any one of us. We've built a movement, and we're not stopping. I looked at each face, seeing my own journey reflected back at me. Here's to the next 10 years, I said. To the women we'll help. The lives will change. The abusers will stop. And to second chances, may we use them wisely, fiercely, and with absolute determination to make the world better than we found it. Hear, hear, the room erupted, and in that moment, surrounded by women who'd survived and thrived, I felt a peace I'd never known in my first life. This was what I'd been reborn for. Not revenge, not justice, though that had come. But this, the knowledge that my suffering had meaning, that my second chance had purpose, that my choice to fight back had rippled outward, changing lives, saving futures, building something lasting and good. They'd tried to make me list her business at my address. After Rebirth, I'd turned their trap into my triumph, and I'd spend every day of my second life making sure other women could do the same. That was the real victory. Not that my enemies suffered, though they had, but that I'd transformed my pain into power, my trauma into a tool for change, my second chance into a lifeline for others. I'd won. Not because I'd destroyed them, but because I'd become indestructible. And I'd used that strength to protect those who weren't there yet. That was revenge. That was justice. That was love. And it was the best possible ending to a story that had started with betrayal and rebirth. A story that would continue, with every woman I helped, every life I changed, every future I protected. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. And I couldn't.
You should have done a sunset. Ah, fuck. Trop, you're so right. I scoped. I just saw. I fucked it. I screwed it. Made sure our new replacement pup was in the room when our old lady went to sleep. Oh, I'm gonna cry. Oh no. Dreamer. Took. Thank you for the follow. Welcome. Really want to try and paint with those mediums. Oh, you should, Jack. Just try it. You never know. You might freaking love it. There's only one way to find out. I was scared of painting in acrylic gouache, if you remember, and I've really loved it. Taught my son death on that day. Yeah. Oh, baby. I've really been enjoying the acrylic gouache. 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 Rest is really good with watercolors. Have you done any gouache, Rest? The first thing I used gouache for was just like, I used just white gouache for the highlights of watercolor pieces, just so you can get that opacity. Yeah, so true, Dreamer. Yeah, just like the moody sunset sky. I want to paint. There's a few reference pictures that I've got I'm excited to have a crack at. It's also like, you know, they all teach you something. There are things that I don't really feel very confident with. Greenery, plants, that kind of thing. I want to work on because I don't feel very confident with it. Nothing like opinion stream painting, such a hopeful and nice way to bring out our inner murderers. Want to do more watercolor? I should go back to watercolor, yeah. How it works with the paints. I don't know if they stay wet for a long period of time. Yeah, it can. I mean, with watercolor, they'll dry pretty quickly, but even down to the paper, that will vary. If you use like a hot press smooth paper, that will stay wet for longer, I think. Gouache is great for clouds and waves. Yeah, yes. I think, I mean, the acrylic is it's different for sure. I like the blendiness of artist's gouache for clouds, I think. Although this is fun and this is working because you can kind of build on top of it, but it does help to kind of blend stuff out. Germex, now with 100% more. Germex. Hi, Germex. Thank you for the follow. Welcome. Hi, Mr. 25. Thank you. I love this. Is such a cozy little hoodie. Half moon was hanging low the other night. Bright gold. Oh, my phone refused to. No, you cannot take a photo of the moon. You just can't. You cannot. It's a curse. You have to enjoy it with your eyes. Gouache dries quite quickly. Acrylic gouache dries really quickly. Regular old gouache, regular degular variety, dries fairly quickly as well, I would say. Hello from Mexico. Hi. I have friends in Mexico right now. Take pictures of it. Well, guess you can. Well, look, you can, technically. Will they look nice? Not with my camera. The moon is a sunlit object. Expose accordingly. True. Run it down. I run a stick painting course for the low cost of 1,000. You're welcome to sign up. Thank you, Amerta. I'll send me the link. You have family in Mexico right now? No way. You're Mexican? Heck yeah. I don't want you to dox yourself. I've never been to Mexico, but I would really, really love to. It seems so beautiful. An easier time with our doggo passing due to my proximity to death. Ah, in hobby taxidermy. Talking so much with friends about farming and hunting. I've taken about roadkill raccoons. Whoa, which look like my dog, but the only difference is that one of them was loved. Yes. I think it is such an interesting thing in, I don't know, at least in the kind of the culture that I've grown up in, but just this, like the separation between the value of animals and the way they're differently valued just because one is assigned value by being a pet, whereas others are just viewed as inherently of less worth as a life, and it really it confuses me, I will say.